Jane Farver was the curator of the show Adele in MIT space in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so that it was quite an effective show. I mean, especially even the publication was a special publication. It was an important moment in the story of Adele. So, and then she visited other exhibitions of Adele after that, of course. But she was the maker of that exhibition. And now, coming to this exhibition, what is your reaction?
Well, when I began to try to convince Adel to work with me, I emailed him. I eventually went and knocked on his door in Paris. He totally ignored me for a long time. But we worked together, and he came as a resident at MIT, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he worked with Ute's students. And there was one, I think, really remarkable project that he did in addition to the exhibition, where there's a crazy project where every year the students push a piano off a building and watch it break. They love this. So he asked me for a piano and a number of students, and he had them break the piano apart, and then he told them their job was to put the piano back together and make it play and make it in tune, and they did it. Each little part, they did it. This is while he's also doing the exhibition, and Ute brought in 2 Norwegian musicians in the end, but his point was that it's time for artists to stop breaking down, but to begin to build up. And I am fascinated by his work, I really am. I think he's one of the most amazing human beings in the art world, but also I love the way that his work speaks so directly to the public in a way that maybe seems slightly obvious at first, but once these images are part of your visual vocabulary, they never go away. And I remember standing in front of the Boberg and watching when they opened Zidane, the huge sculpture, and the number of people who came who just with their cell phones, who were completely taken with a public work of art in a way that I haven't seen in a very, very long time. I think he has the ability to really break down those kind of barriers between the public and the art world. But I also think it's really important to look at his, when you say that the Western model is now superior, I think that that's not really the case in general. I think what's important is that people have not been able to really look past that to important local circumstances, important connections between different types of artists and different currents of artists, and between important local circumstances and local clocks, if you will. So I think that there's so much in almost each one of Adele's pieces that you can unpack as you really think about them. You can take them on the surface, or when you really begin to look and think about the myths he's dealing with, where the power is coming from, what he's really saying. It's really fascinating. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
I just wanted to add, like, in terms of what Jane just said, like, and what you brought up in the terms of resistance, there's also the notion of confrontation. And I think, because just you mentioned the Zidane piece, and it was really, I remember when that soccer game took place, and like it was the last game of Zidane, and this moment when everybody said, like, now he kind of like ruined his career, like his goodbye, but on the other side he also gave everything on stake. I mean, he was not concerned about that, and the question everybody wanted to know, what did the Italian player tell him in the second? Then there were lip readers, etc. And coming back to this notion, it was also confrontation, kind of like, because it was a male confrontation in a game, but it was also a cultural confrontation. And I thought that was really very interesting. And like to have this moment, I mean, it also fascinated other artists, but this notion of like a confrontation, it was there a physical confrontation, but it was also a cultural confrontation. And I think that's quite interesting.
In fact, I mean, as far as I know, the 2 people implied in this story is Zidane and Marco Materazzi. Zidane refused this work. in a very straight terms. Marco Materassi liked the work very much. He appreciated it. And he's very much moved by that. And when I asked Materassi what happened there, I mean, he told me Zidane was not so cool. So, yes, it's a culture of confrontation in this. Not only on the field, but also the comment of Materassi is about a culture of confrontation. Last thing. You're talking about trembling, you're talking about power. There is another very important object in the work of Adel Abdessemed, that is substance. Substance in terms of material, but substance in terms of source of energy, substance as the essence of life, substance as the interior structure of the world. Adel is has a great respect for that. And I don't know if this appears so much in his works for, let's say, for the general public. What do you think, Hans Ulrich?
I was wondering, in terms of substance, I mean, I was kind of thinking, about also, actually today, walking through the show, I was actually also thinking and connecting it to resistance, and things which have been mentioned before about resistance. I was thinking about, in our digital age, that sort of whole idea of maybe, resisting the disappearance of substance, but also resisting the disappearance. I mean, it's kind of interesting, the presence of handwriting in this exhibition is a kind of a resistance, I would say. And that leads, the second encounter I had with Adel, after we had this chance encounter with Fabrice Hibert, I then made a studio visit, and that was around 99. And it was actually precisely in October 99, and that was a very important moment because Adel, on the 20th of October 99, had the French, he got a French passport, he got the French nationality. And for him, this was very much a trigger, actually, to then write on a piece of paper, famously, Mohammed, Karl, Pol Pot. So this incredibly famous sort of iconic piece where he somehow, we all came together at the same time. Mohammed the prophet, whose image we can't show. At the same time, Karl Marx for the ideology, and then Pol Pot, the birth of a monster. And all these three things, came together the day, in his studio, the day he got the French nationality. But at that time, obviously, I didn't pay a lot of attention to the fact that he had written it by hand. I just, it was this incredibly powerful message of these three words together. But now, when we walk through the exhibition and have on the invitation card, have, in the space, at the entrance, all over, the presence of handwriting, it's kind of interesting if you think about Umberto Eco, and when Umberto Eco wrote this text where he says that more and more, if you look at teenagers now, people who have actually grown up with the internet, and that's what we are mapping right now, with Simon Castells, we're doing this research, 89+, where we are mapping artists and all kinds of other practitioners who are born in 89 and younger. And it's extraordinary how handwriting no longer really plays a role. Many, practitioners just don't even use it anymore. In architecture offices, the same. It kind of disappears. So it's kind of interesting how the presence of handwriting of Adel in his work, in this sense, is almost also maybe, a form of resistance.
Maybe we should introduce another word, and that is hypocrisy.
Hmm?
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy?
Whose hypocrisy?
I think it's... No, I think if we talk about resistance and appropriations, and I think there's also, I think Adel has artists, and I think also Adel has a very seismic capacity. detecting areas of hypocrisy.
Wow.
And I think that's to me also quite interesting in terms of, because the question is sometimes when do we get resistant, and when are we triggered by something, when we say like, this is maybe too much or so, like, and I think he really, I mean, he knows that. He's not a naive artist. And I think this kind of producing those images that make also visible to a certain extent this notion of hypocrisy, to me it's quite interesting.
I don't think he takes any kind of moral point of view,
I don't
which,
think
I don't think you meant to imply that. I mean, inevitably, he's involved in an ethical field. He's working in an ethical field, and is prepared to accept, although the individual may lapse ethically or morally, still, in spite of oneself, it comes out
Of a
good in the
society.
end, because it's art.
I didn't mean an individual hypocrisy. I mean, again, more in the sense of value systems. Like, I mean, again, when the show happened in the show was shown before in San Francisco at San Francisco Art Institute at the school. And the show, like the work he did with the animals, like there were such a resistance from PETA, etc. And it was really against the killing of the animals. But on the other, and this is what I mean when it comes to hypocritical moment. And I thought he is not shying away from that. And I remember. I know, but it was not the same exhibition. But of course, the discussion started when the show was scheduled. And again, I have to say, like, in different societies, there are different agreements and value systems. And when do you hit them? And when do we go after something? But if we look a little bit deeper, and Adele looks deeper, we find something very different.
Well, he goes after taboos, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the location of the taboo, and his instinct is to kick it. It's quite healthy. And
Even if I think that is a side effect. Because what really Adele is addressing is this spring of energy.
Spring up?
Energy, something that is exploding. I mean, the work that Hans Ulrich mentioned, when it was exhibited in Manifesta 3 in Ljubljana, it was just a small piece of paper with the name Mohammed Karl Pol Pot. It was in a long room, maybe long as this, narrow room, in a frame. The room was totally empty. You go from the entrance to that wall where it was hung, and so you had to walk to see at least what it was. You were there, you read what was written, Mohammed Karl Pol Pot, and you were pushed out of the room like dynamites. Dynamites. It was an explosion, because you cannot stay there in front of what? Admiration for the writing, contemplation of the aesthetic of the little piece of paper. You got the message, and you are pushed out with a dynamite effect. I mean, is this spring? Yes, you're totally right about hypocrisy, but it's not his aim. Is his presence, his real presence as an artist inside this cultural, social, and political context that that reveal the hypocrisy, but is not his aim to denounce the hypocrisy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I didn't mean it in the sense of denouncing, but it makes something visible. And I think, as you said, like you have to react. You cannot just pass by and contemplate.
Yeah, I don't know, when we are confronted with a chicken there in Printemps, it's not to reveal our hypocrisy of chicken eaters or TV viewers. Is something different. Is you have to stay there. Once you have to see it. You have to watch it, because you are, like I am, the perpetrator of this act without any reason.
One of the things with the exhibition that, or let's say the difference between resistance and defiance, is something that came to mind for me. And resistance for me, it seems like something organized, something that's collaborative, something that's more collective, whereas defiance is more of a spontaneous individual act. So I wanted to see what your thoughts are with looking at the work that of Adel Abdessemed under the sort of the rubric of resistance and that of defiance, sort of an individual, spontaneous and combustible sort of thing, especially since a lot of the work seems to have either a potential energy for violence or a documentation, it seems, of a moment of violence. So.
I think that's a really interesting distinction you're making, because we talk about resistance, it's a rather heavily loaded word. It has political connotations in certain circumstances, or it need not. And the question is, what is he resisting? I mean, what is the resisting, what's the object of his resistance? And there isn't one thing. It's not, it's systemic. And that's the point. And that system is, one could say, I mean, total around him, but also internal. And one sort of thinks sometimes about Adele as a rather romantic figure. There is, I mean, if you, the closest you could get today to a romantic artist in the 19th century sense. And that defiance of fate, or whatever it is, this, the emphasis on life, I mean, that is absolutely out of the romantic thing. And it is the energy with which he portrays this, with which he lives his life and makes his work, which is impressive for me. I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Pier Luigi, and that this is really the distinguishing feature. And that, you know, why do we think Adele's work is any good, you know? I mean, that is the fundamental question. And that is one of the things that is at the heart of that. That he's courageous and he takes things on.
You began by speaking about Western museum systems, and of course the title of this museum is Curious. And when David Elliott did Africa Remix, there was a question that came up, what is African about African contemporary art? And I'm curious what the panel think is Arab, especially given that this is your first curated show as the new director. What is Arab about this Arab modern artist whose show that we're looking at?
The Arab Museum of Modern Art is not a museum of modern Arab art or Arab art. It's art. From here, from there, it's international art. The Arab is the museum, it's not the art produced or showed in it. It's just a
in a way, Adele moved out from his area of origin, and he's not going back.
The show you mentioned, Africa Remix, was dealing with a geographical entity, but also dealing with the fact that the big shows that have been shown internationally of African art up till that point had all been pleading for a particular view of Africa. And as a result, they were pretty abject. So even good work was made to look bad in an environment like that. And so the idea of this show is really to take it as a completely neutral description. We just included Maghreb as well, just all the countries of Africa, not all of them were included, but just to show really the best art that we could find at that time. And just do it like any other show, artists who happened to come from Africa. That was the remix.
Okay, so at this point I would just like to thank all the panelists and also to make two brief announcements. I would like to thank the 26 volunteers who participated in the building of the Peace Shams. Those were local residents here in Doha who volunteered their time. So for those of you who are here, thank you. We have certificates of appreciation for you at the front desk, and if you can meet us at the front desk after this, we'd like to take a group photo. Also, I would like to invite everyone now into the atrium for a reception to celebrate the opening of Laj Door. Thank you.